Did you know that Maybelline, New York was actually created in Chicago? Welcome to the Cosmetic Chronicles. This is the podcast where history meets beauty and tells the amazing stories behind some of the world's most notorious brands. I'm your host, Sarah Carvalho, and I'm a beauty journalist who has been obsessed with makeup since my first swipe of mascara. Maybelline has been around for over 100 years and has created some absolute staples in the makeup industry. Not to age myself, but I am a millennial, and I really consider Maybelline one of the first brands that I remember marketing to me and using celebrity marketing, specifically Sarah Michelle Gellar, at least in my time. She sold me that 3-in-1 foundation stick. I can still remember the ad in Cosmo Girl. I can still remember the Full and Soft mascara. And I mean, lest we forget the Dream Matte Mousse. I mean, that should just send chills down your spine if you are a millennial. But I just remember the ads in the 2000s of using Sarah Michelle Gellar. And what I learned in this research is that Maybelline has actually been using actresses and celebrity marketing since pretty much the very beginning. I think they may have been the first. So I really wanted to start this podcast off with such a huge brand, and I actually found the history to be fascinating. So I hope you do too. I do want to say that I'm going to make sure I put all of my sources into the show notes because I want to give them all credit. I specifically want to shout out the Made in Chicago Museum website. They have some great pieces there. Actually, I want to go next time I'm in Chicago, but they have some fantastic imagery of old advertisements. They have actual pieces of antique Maybelline makeup and the packaging, but they have a great article about Maybelline in particular and kind of the family behind it. So I will be sure to post that source as well as an article from cosmeticsandskin.com, which was also a great resource for me when I was researching this. So I will post everything in the show notes, but I just wanted to kind of call them out at the very top of the episode. So, like I said, Maybelline has been around for over 100 years. More specifically, their story begins 108 years ago in the Edgewater section of Chicago, which again shocked me because I know Maybelline as Maybelline, New York, but it actually began in Chicago. So many people believe that Maybelline was solely founded by Mabel Williams, who was a working class Chicago girl who would experiment with putting coal dust and Vaseline on her brows and lashes in the kitchen of her family's home. But what I learned in the research is that it was actually her brother, Tom Lyle Williams, who decided to try and build on Mabel's experimentation and create a cosmetics brand from it. So he was only 19 years old when he decided to start this. So Tom was someone who it's actually really hard to find information about him. He was a closeted married gay man. I noticed on the Wikipedia page that they called him a chemist, which he wasn't technically. I think they called him like a pharmacist somewhere else. He wasn't a pharmacist. There's very few interviews with him. Again, to the point where people didn't really know that he was kind of like the founder of the brand as an actual brand itself. And so the Made in Chicago Museum really did some amazing research around Tom, and obviously not a lot was known about him because he didn't really want people to know a lot. So I'm going to focus on what he did with Maybelline, but I recommend looking more into him. So what happened was Tom eventually bought a chemistry set and began working on finding a more stable formula based on Mabel's kitchen concoctions. So he did use the help of a local pharmaceutical maker, and he decided to create a laboratory called Maybell Laboratory, obviously after his sister. And he ended up creating what became Maybelline's first product in 1917, calling it the Lash Brow-ine. Lash Brow-ine? It's not my favorite name, and it actually will change later on in this story, but the idea is that they were playing on the popularity of Vaseline and hence the "ine" at the end of Lash Brow-ine. Again, not my favorite, but I wasn't there, so they couldn't get my opinion. But the product was made with a scented cream consisting of refined white petroleum or Vaseline, along with several oils to add sheen. And it claimed to, quote, nourish and promote the growth of eyelashes and eyebrows. So there's an old advertisement, again, available in that museum in Chicago, that says, quote, beautiful eyelashes and eyebrows make beautiful eyes make a beautiful face. So, I mean, sure. According to that Made in Chicago Museum article, Tom was known for saying, quote, good makeup was as good as being born with it. Let me know if that sounds familiar. The Lash Brown Een began as an exclusive mail order product, but Tom would later explain how this was a difficult sell, since not many women outside of people who worked in theater or, quote, outside the pale of good society, end quote, were actually wearing makeup. So it wasn't really something that people felt was appropriate. So he said in a rare 1934 interview, quote, my capital was very small, and while my product was good, I was faced with the job of selling women on the idea that it was perfectly moral to use eye beautifiers. My job was to make women more conscious of their eyes and the possibilities of making them more alluring, to break down prejudice, and of course, to sell my product, end quote. So I thought that was a really interesting idea. You have to remember this was the early 1900s. Again, people weren't really wearing makeup at that time. But what may have been probably considered, I'm assuming, I'm going to just lay that out there with no facts, but I'm just going to say I feel 1917 was probably one of the first times that a brand would use a celebrity influencer marketing strategy. So that's what Tom did. He recruited up-and-coming movie stars to help promote the lash line. So these actresses included Ethel Clayton, Viola Dana, and Gloria Swanson. And it actually made it quite successful. So after the success of the Lash Brown the Lash Brow Een, Tom worked again with those pharmaceutical makers to help create a cake eyelash and eyebrow beautifier, eventually creating the Maybelline eyelash beautifier, aka a cake mascara. So I pulled this description of a cake mascara from that Cosmetics and Skin article because I had no idea what they were talking about. But apparently it's like this kind of dry bar, and then you can use a little brush to kind of like you wet the... Clearly, I'm a beauty chemist because I'm like the thing with the things. No, so you have like kind of a block of pigment and then you wet it and then use a small brush to kind of like to scrub it, and then you put it on your lashes and your eyebrows. So this is the actual description from cosmeticsandskin.com. Quote, like other products of its type, the coloring agents were suspended in a base of sodium stearate soap. The soap and the pigments were mixed together, extruded into strips, stamped, and dried. So that's where you would get kind of these small little, I just think of them as like little thin blocks. The product was applied by first wetting the cake, then using a small brush to lift and apply the color to the eyebrows and eyelashes. So this new product came in 2 shades. It was black and brown, and was sold for 75 cents in a small box with a picture of a Maybelle girl on the top. So it was advertised as being a, quote, ideal harmless preparation for darkening eyelashes and eyebrows. They didn't really use the term mascara at this point, but that's pretty much what it was doing. It was basically a mascara and like a brow gel. This eyelash beautifier was the first product that used the name Maybelline, but the company was still technically referred to as Maybelle Laboratories, at least as far as I can tell based on some of these old advertisements. However, in 1920, Tom lost an appeal over a trademark dispute and could no longer use the Lash Brow Een name. This led to him having to use the name Maybelline in all later branding and advertising. So the official brand name change would occur in 1923. So from 1923 on, everything would be Maybelline. And then during the Depression, Maybelline grew its line of cosmetics by adding eyeliner pencils in black and brown, and also eyeshadows in blue, black, brown, green, and violet, which I thought was really interesting. And then the Maybelline Eyelash Beautifier was later reformulated in 1931 and renamed the Maybelline Eyelash Darkener, eventually being referred to as mascara. So I want to take a really quick detour into what was known as the Lash Lure scandal of 1933. Please let me know if you've ever heard of this, because this was new to me and it is absolutely wild. If you're a little squeamish, just a heads up, we're going to talk about some eye stuff. So I know some people have like eye issues when you hear about like certain diseases of the eye. So just FYI, fast forward a little bit if it's not your thing. But according to the American Academy of Ophthalmology, The Journal of the American Medical Association reported 6 cases between 1933 and 1934 that highlighted adverse effects of Lash Lure. Now, Lash Lure was an eyelash and eyebrow dye popular in the early 1930s. So these effects were specifically from this product. Blindness was one of these side effects. This Lash Lure scandal, not only did it blind people, but it also ended up playing a huge role in improving the overall safety of cosmetics. So the first adverse effect was reported in July of 1933. And these side effects were severe dermatitis of the eyelids and surrounding skin and exuberant conjunctival edema. All my ophthalmologists, come to the front. Exuberant conjunctival edema that began almost immediately after dyeing the lashes with Lash Lure. And apparently the only way to provide complete relief to this person was to remove all of their eyelashes. Whew, okay. 4 months later, there were 4 additional cases of adverse side effects with Lash Lure, and those included vesicular eruption and marked edema of adjacent skin, as well as keratitis and corneal ulceration and necrosis. So in layman's terms, thanks to Google, and clearly not my eye doctorate degree, what this means is that the side effects included irritation, inflammation of the skin on the eyelid, swelling in the clear tissue that covers the eye, a cluster of small blisters that have significant swelling nearby the eyelid, also inflammation of the eye surface, and serious damage to the clear part of the eye, including sores. So just a lot of gross, it just sounds like a lot of gross stuff. So the following year, the Journal of the American Medical Association actually reported a fatality associated with the Lash Lure. So it was a healthy 52-year-old woman. She had her right eyebrow completely removed by plucking and then had Lash Lure applied to the brows and lashes. I'm assuming it was to help grow, or I don't really know the reasoning. Within a few hours, the right eyelid became very swollen, and by the next day, she had a fever of up to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. On the 8th day of dealing with this, she ended up getting very sick, had deep ulcerations of the right eyelid and also inside the eyelid, and she ended up dying later that day. So what they think happened is plucking the eyebrow had provided multiple entry sites for Lash Lure to get into her skin, and then death was assumed to ensue from a secondary bacterial infection. That is absolutely wild. That is wow. Okay. So what did this Lash Lure scare mean for cosmetics and Maybelline for that matter? Well, for one, for cosmetics, at this time, Franklin Roosevelt became president, and he had a major goal to create a better public health system. So once he took office, people began pushing Congress to regulate the use of cosmetics through the FDA. So I'm going to quote the American Academy of Ophthalmology again here, but they said, quote, additionally, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the FDA waged extensive publicity campaigns to promote revision of the act, including a display at the 1933 Chicago's World Fair to highlight the lack of regulation of cosmetics. So this display at the Chicago's World Fair featured before and after photos of a woman blinded by Lash Lure. A reporter dubbed the exhibit the American Chamber of Horrors. Good Lord. Okay. Despite all this effort, it wasn't until 1938 that the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was passed, which finally regulated cosmetics. And the first product seized under this new law was, shocker twist, can't believe it, Lash Lure, which was alleged to be adulterated with, quote, a poisonous or deleterious substance. Like, you think? Yeah. So anyway, basically this Lash Lure scare of 1933 eventually led to the regulation of cosmetics and led to certain ingredients or substances to be banned from being used in cosmetics. So when it comes to Maybelline, the Lash Lure scare had obviously hurt sales. So Maybelline decided to work towards obtaining the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, making sure to clearly place this approval seal once they got it, and phrases like contains no dye, absolutely harmless, and perfectly safe liberally across all of their ad copy for the next decade or so. And I actually have an ad for them for their mascara in 1934, and it says, quote, for absolute safety in darkening your lashes, use a genuine harmless Maybelline. Non-smarting, tear-proof Maybelline is, all caps, not a, all caps, dye, but a pure and highly refined mascara for instantly darkening and beautifying the eyelashes. For over 16 years, millions of women have used Maybelline mascara with perfect safety and most gratifying results, end quote. So they really were like, we're good. We're good. Everyone calm down. We're good. We're good. So 1933, around the same time as the scare, a man named Harold Raglan, or Rags, joined the company and assumed control of sales and promotion. Now, the important thing about this is Raglan was the only non-family member to become an executive at Maybelline. But he was also a marketing genius, and he really exploded Maybelline into a more of a global brand and really started bringing in more attention and focus into Maybelline, and also expanding it beyond just lashes and brows. So under his direction, he switched from a mail order business and started selling products through chain and department stores, which obviously was a huge deal. He also created something known as carded merchandising, which showcased the little red Maybelline boxes that the products came in, showcased them upright rather than stacked in a pile on the counter. So what that did was it gave people a visual. They didn't have to look down and look at the boxes, and they could see it as they were walking by, like a little mini ad, just as they were walking by the aisle. And that was a huge thing. No one had really done that before. And according to cosmeticsandskin.com, the 1930s saw Maybelline expand its global reach by entering Canada and Europe, with South America and other countries following after the war. So in the US, despite increased competition, numbers showed that Maybelline still had about 75% of the American mascara market in 1947. That's pretty impressive. So Tom Lyle eventually incorporated Maybelline in 1954, and the company saw 2 decades of continuing growth, with sales eventually reaching $25 million in 1966. They remained focused on eye products with the release of their infamous Magic Mascara in 1958, and then the Ultra Lash Mascara in 1963. Now, what some people may not realize is that Maybelline was a family-run business for over 40 years. During what is called their Chicago era, which stretched all the way into the late 1960s, Maybelline was kept a family-owned business, operating for decades out of a central office in that Chicago neighborhood. Tom's own great-niece, Sherry Williams, wrote a book about the family called The Maybelline Story and the Spirited Family Dynasty Behind. That was published in 2010. Adding this to my library list, ASAP, I need to know everything. But she talks a lot about how the family ran this business. Everyone did something in it. And I can only imagine that there's a lot of stories. Just with the amount of success they had, I can only imagine what was going on behind the scenes. So I haven't read it yet. I'm going to be adding it to my list. I knew I wouldn't have time to get into the family dynasty of it all, but I have a feeling there are some interesting stories in there. So in 1967, Tom Lyle decided to sell the company. He was 70 years old. He was like, I'm done. I'm good. He eventually sold it to Plough Inc. I think that's how you say it. Plough. Correct me if I'm wrong. Plough Inc. He sold it in December of 1967 for $136 million in cash and stock. Now, for reference, that's about $1 billion in today's money. Tom's great niece, Sherry, said, quote, "The stock was only divided among the family, and the employees have been loyal to Maybelline since the beginning. Even the stock boy received $1 million, and a large portion was given to the goodwill and care." I love that. So in 1969, Plough began manufacturing Maybelline products in a new laboratory in Memphis. So this was the first time the company was taken out of Chicago in its history. So, people say that was sad, it had the building in Chicago became a very prominent building. They had an M over the door, and it was like a well-known piece of architecture, or I should just say history, in Chicago. And so by moving it to Memphis, it just kind of people just felt that it was kind of a sad end to their Chicago era. So in 1971, Plough merged with Scheuring to form Scheuring-Plough, and eventually created the Great Lash, which is that water-based mascara that we all know. If you've ever been to the drugstore, it's that pink and black mascara. Some of them I think the waterproof has a green cover. Now listen, this is a controversial opinion. I really don't like that mascara. I really don't like it. It is my least favorite mascara. I'm sorry. It's great for the bottom lashes, but I tried it so many times. I remember when I was first getting into makeup, mascara is my favorite. And I remember it was always number one on Allure's list and Cosmo. And I kept trying to buy it, and I kept being I don't like it. But it is I think it's their number one sell. It's a a very well-known Maybelline mascara. I respect it, but I don't like it. Okay, so now we're just going to kind of get through a few more notable dates here. So 1971 was the Great Lash Mascara. 1991 is when the tagline that we all maybe know so well was actually created. I thought it was around for a lot longer. If you remember the quote I gave earlier about Tom when he said good makeup was as good as being born with it, well, someone very smartly decided in 1991 that, you know what, let's use that as a tagline. And the tagline became, maybe she's born with it, maybe it's Maybelline. And I think I read in part of my research too that in a consumer study, that was the number one known tagline, the number one most recognizable tagline or something like that. I believe it. I think everyone kind of knows that one, whether you realize it or not. It's like in your head. 1996, Maybelline was acquired by L'Oreal USA. Its headquarters were then moved to New York, and the factory was moved to Brooklyn in 2000. And then in 2001, Maybelline officially became Maybelline New York. Now, like I said, I always thought it was Maybelline New York, but no, Maybelline was Chicago born and bred and had a lot of business and jobs and opportunities that they created for people in Chicago. So now Maybelline New York is the number one cosmetic brand in the world. It's available in over 120 countries. Even after all these years, they're still creating some really interesting products that I think are still hitting it out of the park. The lifter gloss for me is a huge one. The color tattoo eyeshadow, I don't know if they have it anymore in the same format, but they used to have it in the pots and they reminded me of the paint pots by MAC. The Instant Age Rewind Eraser Concealer, I think is like one of the number one concealers in the world. The Sky High mascara had a moment on TikTok. Like, they're still kicking. They're still doing their thing. And like I said, they had some very notable past ones like the Dream Matte Mousse. And, you know, they were always innovating, I will say. Maybe it didn't always work, but they were the first foundation stick that I really remember. The Matte Mousse was a different formula that I ever remembered. Like, they were coming out with interesting things, and I remember always being excited to go to CVS and grabbing the newest thing from them. There are actually some other cosmetic industry standards that Maybelline helped launch. So they became known for their before and after advertisements showcasing glamorous transformations. They were also the first cosmetics company to do radio advertising, and then also that carded merchandising, changing how merchandise was displayed on counters and in stores. They were one of the first to use the Good Housekeeping seal of approval to communicate trust, purity, and perfection. And they, again, were huge at using celebrities. They were all Hollywood from the get-go. And this continued throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s. Linda Carter was a huge one for them. Josie Moran, Miranda Kerr, Sarah Michelle Gellar is who I remember the most. And still to this day, current faces of Maybelline include Adriana Lima, Christy Turlington, Jordan Dunn, Gigi Hadid, and Winnie Harlow. So that's the Chronicles of Maybelline. Let me know what you think of the brand. Do you have any all-time favorites for them? Do you think any of them are overhyped? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. And thanks for tuning in. Feel free to share some other brands you'd like to see covered on this podcast. Again, you can find all of the resources I used in the research below in the show notes, and definitely share with any beauty history nerd that you know. And I'll see you next time on the Cosmetic Chronicles.